We all gotta go sometime. I was just hoping for something more heroic.
We have confirmation that this is true. You do have coming in. That's confirmed reports. I repeat, we have confirmed reports of failed fire detonations in Philadelphia and Manhattan. Dear Celestia.
That was Blue Boy with Grave Fission. Hey there friends, I'm Nuclear Yuki, and welcome once again to a nuclear reading show. Today we're continuing on with Kkat's Fallout Equestria. And also, if you're enjoying what I'm bringing to the cold, dark wasteland, don't be afraid to tell your friends about me, or find me on Twitter as Nuclear Yuki. It's a big help. Oh, and a bit of a disclaimer, since the gangs can be a bit feisty, Fallout is owned by Bethesda, and Hasbro made My Little Pony Friendship is Magic. With all that said and done, welcome, friends, to the Wasteland.
Chapter 39, This Coming Storm, Part 1. Souls. Souls are the spirit and the essence of a pony, the fundamental core of their nature, and the kernel of life that exists beyond the biology of flesh and blood and mental synapses. I'd seen the empirical evidence of the reality of souls. Beyond that, my beliefs in the afterlife, where the souls of the dead ponies continued on in eternal peace, and in the transcendent souls of Celestia and Luna as goddesses who watched over us with love and pity and hope, these surpassed the foundations of knowledge and were the architecture of faith. But the two things I did know: souls had a living power, and a soul was a hard thing to kill. There was no way I could know for sure if the Black Book had been destroyed, but if it was not, then it was either buried under rubble or fused into a crater of glass. The Black Book hadn't needed to be the conduit of some eldritch cosmic horror, or its pages filled with blasphemous magic, to corrupt those close to it. It was enough that the book was the host to a wicked and twisted soul, the soul of an insane, maleficent zebra. The Black Book called out to those around it who were susceptible to its influence. Two alicorns walked into the throne room. One sensed the presence of the Black Book. The other did not. Calamity had not reacted to it when I had found it. My other friends had been near it as they travelled with me, but it had sunk its barbed hooks into my mind even before I had retrieved it. We had encountered two alicorns who had been affected by the temptations of the Black Book without ever having seen it or opened its pages. Nightseer had been transformed by the book's proximity. She had been one of those who the goddess had sent to find the book. Did her telepathy leave her especially defenceless? Had the Black Book filled the void in her mind left by the absence of the goddess? I was vulnerable to it. My weakness, addiction, curiosity, and the shame of only having a single spell played to its strengths. The soul of the Black Book had been particularly ancient and powerful. I possessed the Black Book for less than 2 days, and had already begun to tempt me. Clumsily, perhaps at first. The book wasn't telepathic like the goddess. Most of the horrors in my nightmare I had provided myself. The book merely used the tools my fevered nightmares gave it. And still, I did not have the strength alone to withstand its first probing attacks. To be able to stand against that influence as it continuously tried to erode you away, to hold any part of yourself after years with the book, much less to take its twisted gifts and create something noble and good from them, that would take a level of moral endurance and fortitude almost beyond comprehension. Be unwavering. How often had those 6 ponies from the past, through the radiance of their souls, given me insights I couldn't have had myself, or allowed me to tap reserves of strength and will that I shouldn't have been able to muster? They had saved me and guided me since finding Applejack in Old Appaloosa, their influence growing with each statuette I found. But it was only after I'd brought them all together that they had been able to intervene on my behalf more directly. I believe it was no coincidence that Rarity was the first to appear. My mind and soul had ever so briefly become the battleground for two warring influences. One powerful soul of evil and madness, against 6 shards that shone with the virtue and hope of Rarity and her 5 closest friends. The shards of the statuettes were not truly those of the Ministry Mares. I suppose they were more like Rarity's soul wearing perfect disguises, but they shone with the true nature of those other ponies. They burned with the love and compassion and virtue and nobility of each of the Ministry Mares in turn. They were eternal, metaphysical images of the deepest, truest nature of those ponies, lit up like beacons, fueled by a shining piece of Rarity herself. Rarity, whose magical talent had always been in the shadow of Twilight Sparkle, must have seemed like easy prey to the Zebra soul within the Black Book. It had been wrong. She was one of the bearers of the elements of harmony for a reason. And when the soul images of the Ministry Mares were brought together, they brought the inner fire that fuels the elements of harmony with them. They had proven more powerful, even as mere shards, than the whole soul residing within the book. Or at least, powerful enough to give me the strength I needed to fend it off. If the Black Book could not stand against the gestalt of the Ministry Mare's souls when they were only shards, how could it have stood up against the whole soul of Twilight Sparkle combined in unity with 3 of the most magically powerful mares of her time? The Black Book was not telepathic, but it could sense souls around it, knowing instinctively who it could manipulate, and who it could not. That last temptation of the book had an air of desperation to it. The Zebra soul had no way of knowing if I was about to destroy its soul jar. It had been reacting to something else. The Black Book had sensed a goddess, and it had been afraid. What happens to a soul when it no longer has a body to hold it? Does it truly transcend? Does it spread out, no longer contained, like the hydrogen in a balloon that has been popped, until it is no longer truly a soul, indistinguishable from the environment? What of the souls trapped together in the horror that was the goddess? My goal had been to destroy the physical reality of the goddess, and free the souls trapped inside, to allow Twilight Sparkle, Trixie, and the others the rest they deserved and had been denied. I'd not expected the goddess to try to save her children, but I'd not expected the impact of the 6 memory orbs either. By showing those memories to the goddess, I'd awoken something in Trixie. The goddess had become lost, and I believe part of her was able to find herself in those memories. The star orb had been created for comparison. By showing the memory orb to the goddess, I had acted like Rarity's mirror for Pinkie Pie, just like I'd hoped the memories of the balloon orb might stir whatever still remained of Twilight Sparkle. And what about my own soul? If I died here, would Celestia and Luna welcome me, or turn me away in horror and disgust? I knew what I'd done, and my soul was blackened from it. I'd finally taken that step off the cliff. I'd sacrificed my own morality and goodness to save the Equestrian wasteland. I was Red-Eye now, through and through, and there would be a price for that. 38 minutes would have been plenty of time, but that time was never meant for me. It was time enough for Zenith and Calamity to escape. I'd been willing to forfeit my own life. 38 minutes would have been long enough for the Alicons of the goddess to have scoured Maripony, found the bomb, and disarmed whatever timer Red-Eye had constructed for it. But the Balefire bomb had never been in Maripony. 38 minutes was not long enough for the Alicons to have fought their way through the maze of Hellhound Warrens and found the bomb hidden dozens of yards beneath Maripony's foundations. The Balefire bomb had gone off in a subterranean detonation directly beneath us. I awoke in pitch darkness. I felt sick, even worse than in the days past. My body was hot, my mouth was dry, my stomach was twisted painfully, but there was nothing in it to heave. My body was covered in sweat, and there was a crushing weight on my lower body that brought back memories of a nightmare. Being trapped under a wall, crying out while I watched Calamity and Velvet walk away. There was a hiss from the darkness below. The floor beneath me slanted away. I would have slid down into the hissing blackness, but I was pinned. My pip-buck was clicking slowly. For a few terrifying minutes, I had no idea where I was. Then I remembered the bomb, remembered running into the safe room, remembered bucking the emergency button. I didn't recall a whole lot after that. My memories were a jumble. But I did remember the almighty thwomp from somewhere beneath us. The the feeling of the whole room being thrust upwards as the bomb annihilated everything above it. A brief moment of wastelessness, and the rush of falling. Click, click. I turned on my eyes forward sparkle, wondering when I had turned it off. A dozen warnings flashed across it. A safe room had survived 2 mega spells, one almost point blank. There was a microfracture somewhere in its protective walls, and radiation was leaking in. Considering how hot it must be outside, the fact that I was still alive and the room wasn't an unbearable oven spoke amazing praise of Twilight and her ministry, but I was swiftly reaching fatal levels of exposure. I floated a Radaway from my saddlebags, bracing against the horrid taste. According to my inventory sorter, the other medical supplies I'd packed, several healing potions and a vial of Zenith's bleeding stopper goop, were all gone. I had been conscious before, but I had no recollection of it. The magic of the safe room must have prevented me from being turned into paste by the concussive force of the blast alone. Even still, with the fall I must have taken, I was lucky I didn't break my neck. Or anything else. According to my EFS, I was remarkably unbattered for a mare who was dying. Wait, hadn't there been some pony else in here with me? Peering into the darkness, I tried to remember. My EFS compass was telling me I was alone. I lifted my pip leg and turned on the light. Oh, merciful goddesses. My pip-buck light shone down a room, tilted at an insane angle. The terminal bank had torn from the wall. The concrete of the ceiling had collapsed in, revealing the shiny purple-tinted metal above it. A large slab of the concrete lay across me, pinning me in place. Below, the lower third of the room was filled with discoloured water, rubble, and the mangled filing cabinet. A small spray was coming from a section in the wall which had torn open. Something floated in the dark pool beneath me. It was a more spacious coffin than the healing booth, but I'd been foolish to think this room would save me. I was trapped, locked inside, and even if I could escape, outside was instant death. I'm out of food, and the safe room's water talisman seems to have been corrupted, Twilight had said. At least I'm fairly confident that pure water isn't supposed to be that colour. The water talisman was tainted. The body of what had once been Ambrosia was beneath that water. Mostly. Her body had bulged and metastasized under the taint, straining against the armour. A blob of malformed flesh had pushed out through the open visor like a tongue. A fleshy, grotesquely misshapen worm floated on the surface of the water. I screamed as I realised it was one of my own hind legs. After several long minutes of terror, I realised I could feel both of my hind legs. Barely able to breathe, I shifted my light, trying to look under the slab that was crushing me. Both my hind legs were there, intact and healthy, except one was the pink of exposed skin, with only a slight fuzz of a coat. I'd lost my leg in the fall, and I'd regrown it. I didn't think it was possible to even feel sicker, but I did. A deep, soul-aching horror filled me as I realised that I wasn't even a pony anymore. I was something else. I wanted to cry, to scream. Was I a ghoul, transformed by the bomb, or was this from my exposure to the taint? How far removed was I now from being one of the goddess's children? At least the radiation would kill me before the room filled with enough for me to drown. Unless I was enough of a pseudo-alicorn that the radiation wouldn't kill me. I prayed that it was. Please, please, Celestia, I beg you. Have mercy on me. I turned off my light. It was better not seeing. Something wrenched in the safe room. The concrete slab scraped against me as it shifted, drawing blood. The wounds were already closing as I tried to brace myself, worried that the slab might slide off. And then I felt the whole room lift, soaring into the air. The tainted water washed over me as the room righted itself. The misshapen flesh blob that had once been my leg washed up against me. I screamed in horror at the slimy touch of my desecrated former flesh. A violent grinding filled the air, and the metal shutters over the windows pulled away, revealing a purple-tinted sky of clouds filled with blowing ash. The armoured glass shattered, the razor-sharp shards hovering and then whisking away. My pit-buck began to click rapidly. Somewhere above, I spotted the dark silhouette of a wagon and a glowing light of green and gold. For a moment, I thought it was Pyrelight, but then I recognised the glow was coming from a Pegasus. Had my friends come to rescue me? How? And at what cost? Oh, Calamity! I thought, weeping without tears. What have you done? But something was wrong. A purple glow enveloped me, a second floating the slab off my leg. I was levitated out through the obliterated window. The Super Alicorn, her coat a dark purple to the point of black, stared at me with glowing eyes as she casually tossed away the safe room, performing telekinesis that would have overstrained me with effortless ease. The clouds above seemed awfully close. I glanced downward. We were very, very high. Below, the second crater of Splendid Valley glowed in the aftermath. With a beat of her wings, she flew up level with the wagon above us, bringing me with her. I realised at once that the wagon was not the Sky Bandit, and the glowing Pegasus was not Calamity. Ditsy-do? The super irradiated ghoul grinned happily at me, a sickly golden-green light emanating from her mouth and around her teeth. The creatures of radiation do not merely heal in its presence. If they absorb enough of it, they grow stronger, more powerful. Ditsy-do had come into Splendid Valley looking for me. She had saved me, and... The Super Alicorn set me on the front bench of the absolutely everything delivery wagon right behind Ditsy-do. Without the glow of her magic, the purple tint vanished from the sky, traded for a sickly green. My pipbox clicking went insane. We were high enough above the crater for the radiation levels to be merely bad, but Ditsy-do was shedding enough radiation to make this a very short rescue. The glowing ghoul smiled and pointed back at the wagon. I turned around, looking in through the small window. Inside the wagon were crates of Radaway, the packets glowing an inviting orange. I quickly levitated several and began to drink, turning to thank her. I stopped as my eyes caught the cutie mark on the Super Alicorn's flank, a large pink star surrounded by smaller white ones. The Super Alicorn was silent, impassive. Her gaze seemed fixed on my saddlebags. I was struck by a flash of insight. The goddess sent her children away, but she was telepathic, maintaining contact with them. When her body was destroyed, and the souls of the countless ponies who had been consumed into her were set free, some of them, the strongest ones, found their way into the bodies of her fleeing children. Possession. But those bodies already had souls of their own, and it was unlikely that this could last. Already, the cutie mark on the Super Alicorn was beginning to fade. I scrambled. If this was Twilight Sparkle in any way, there was something she needed to hear. I turned up the volume on my ear bloom and levitated it towards her as I found the file. The voice of Pinkie Pie, tinny and distorted, crackled through the air.
Hi, Twilight! It's me! I mean, I have you with me now, so you'll kind of be with me anyway. But it's not the same. I want the real Twilight Sparkle. I want my friend back. Please? I'll do anything.
The Super Alicorn had hovered, seeming transfixed by the sound, until the message ended. Then, wordlessly, she turned and began to fly away. The cutie mark on her flank was already completely gone. Twilight, wait! I cried out after the disappearing Alicorn. Star Sparkle's still alive! And Spike! But whatever part of Twilight Sparkle my words might have once been able to reach was gone now, evaporated, or, if my heart could hope, just asleep. I wanted to cry, but my body couldn't produce tears. I drank another of those horrid Radaways as Ditsy-do turned and began flying us out of Splendid Valley. Ditsy-do brought the wagon low as we reached the edge of the valley. We began flying along the border, moving more slowly. We were searching for something. I asked what, but Ditsy-do couldn't speak.
What did you do? What did you just do?
The voice of Ambrosia fluttered through my mind. I fought to remember. I told her about the bomb. I was sure about that. I couldn't recall exactly what I had said, but an antsy mare with a magical energy battle saddle didn't exactly engender a desire to lie. Her response had been to try to call Harbinger through the broadcaster built into her helmet.
This room's designed to stop mega spells.
I recalled telling her.
Your radio isn't going to penetrate.
She had looked at me with panic.
I have to tell Harbinger. He has to get out of here. We have to pull back.
Her words had sparked a burst of fear in my breast.
How many ponies do you have outside?
The ground passed slowly beneath us. I couldn't remember any more. I caught them on my eyes forward sparkle, friendly lights appearing on my EFS compass, before I actually spotted my friends. As we approached a clearing not far from the devastated Red-Eye camp, Steelhooves appeared, pulling camouflage netting off the Sky Bandit. Velvet Remedy, Zenith and Calamity emerged from within. They looked worn, weary and bedraggled. Calamity immediately took to the air while Velvet and Zenith scanned the skies. Pyrelight was missing from the group. Where was Pyrelight?
Did you find anything this time?
My Pegasus friend shouted. I tried to jump up, but my body just didn't have the energy. So instead, I waved. He couldn't see me anyway. Ditsy-Doo was too bright. Ditsy-Doo flew us in closer, pulling up and hovering at the edge of the clearing. I downed yet another Radaway as she waved Calamity back. I felt weak, sick and half dead. My body was alien to me now. I wasn't me anymore. But all of that paled in comparison to the wash of joy at the impending reunion. I needed to get to Tempony Tower, get cleansed of all the taint I'd suffered, assess what's left of me, and, if Amage would still have me, spend a forever with her and my friends. A short forever, unfortunately. I cleared the way for Red-Eye to ascend, and he still had a host of unicorns he planned to sacrifice in the process. With the threats of the goddess and the Black Book taken care of, I now had a new quest before me, to brave the Everfree Forest and rescue those unicorns from Red-Eye's cathedral. I probably didn't have a lot of time, now that Red-Eye couldn't count on alicorns for protection anymore. He would likely act fast. But I was in no shape to fight a Radroach, much less infiltrate a stronghold. My body was weeping for me to give it care and rest. I couldn't push further until I had done so.
Hi, it's Littlepip.
Calamity shouted ecstatically.
Hi, Everpony. Ditsy's brought back Littlepip. She's alive.
Velvet Remedy and Zenith began to stomp in applause. Velvet gave out a thankful shout. Steelhooves whinnied.
Thank Applejack.
He turned to the others.
Okay, let's get out of here. I don't like being in one place too long, especially this close to...
The ground erupted. Fountains of dirt burst into the air as half a dozen hellhounds tore themselves out of the ground. Ditsy-Doo pulled up as one of them swung her magical energy rifle around and fired at us. Velvet Remedy let out a scream. Calamity spun in the air, kicking the lever of his battle saddle, switching ammo. One of the hellhounds closed on Zenith, taking a swipe. The zebra ducked, turning and bucking the hellhound in the chest, dropping her. Steelhooves began to fire, his grenade machine gun tearing apart one of the hellhounds as she aimed a multi-gem magical shotgun towards Velvet and Zenith.
Get to the wagon.
Calamity shouted as he took a shot, staggering a hellhound who was trying to climb onto the Sky Bandit. The earth beneath Steelhooves blasted upwards as a hellhound lashed up out of the ground. The hellhound's claw slashed in a long arc, slicing through Steelhooves' armor. Steelhooves' armored body fell to the broken ground with a heavy thud. His armored head rolled a few yards away. The world stopped. The battle still raged, but it was someplace far away, all the colour and sound seeming to mute, leaving just me, the beating of my heart, and the slow rocking of Steelhooves' head. Steelhooves was dead. A cold, wet chill ran down my body, and there was no coming back from that. I'd seen Zenith decapitate Cancelot Zebra. The little pony in my head was just shaking in denial. No, she insisted. There'll be an ugly warping sound and he'll be back up with us, just like always. Steelhooves was dead. I couldn't move, couldn't feel, couldn't breathe. My mind was just locked up. The gears jammed. The hellhounds weren't going to give me a moment to process, much less to grieve. The hellhound who'd killed Steelhooves stepped forward, skewered his claws through Steelhooves' helmet, then spun and hurled the armoured head of my companion, trying to knock us out of the sky. Ditsy-Doo dodged and Steelhooves' head slammed against her wagon next to me, splintering wood. The impact cracked his helmet's headlamp. Something snapped inside me. My horn burst with light, layer upon layer of overglow, brighter than even Ditsy-Do. The hellhounds were surrounded with light as they shot upwards into the sky. All of them. Higher and higher until they were nothing but dark specks. And then they weren't visible at all. "Steel hooves!" Velvet screamed, dashing to the fallen, headless body and wrapping it in her forelegs. All the others turned, eyes wide as they realized we had lost one of our own. Thud! The ground shook as the first hellhound fell out of the sky. The mangled, broken body oozed. Do you even know what balefire is? Another flash of memory tugged at me as we approached New Appaloosa. We were flying low, moving quickly. Zenith stood on the Sky Bandit, watching the clouds. I got the impression we should be walking, but my condition was too severe for me to even try the journey. "It ain't safe to fly no more," Calamity called out to me, flying as close as he could to the absolutely everything wagon without suffering Ditsy exposure. "Damn Enclave have patrols everywhere, and anything airborne tends to catch their attention. Not that the Sky Bandit has a low profile, considering our cloud breach last month." We just couldn't catch a break. "You sure it was Harbringer you saw in Maripony?" Calamity asked as we began to slow. "That's who he said he was," I called back, hating how much effort it took to shout. Damn, I figured this had to be big when a whole regiment of Enclave descended on Maripony. Zenith and I barely made it out of there. But we blew up a member of the Enclave High Council? I could use one of your creative swears about now, Littlepip. Calamity frowned. Congratulations! Well, we just declared war on the Enclave. Ouch. But even as I grimaced, I realized that the Enclave had shown up knowing that Red Eye was plotting against the goddess. If anything, they would suspect that he'd been behind the bomb, and I'd been his agent, which, on a very real level, was absolutely accurate. From the Enclave's perspective, Red Eye had just declared war. I could see Pyrelight circling above the city, a single bird of prey. She let out a hoot as the two wagons landed, Ditsy-Do setting down a little distance from the Sky Bandit. Pyrelight dove out of the air, disappearing into the town. "Maybe he got out," I offered weakly. "Not much chance of that," Calamity called back. "Moment the Alicons were clear, a huge Alicon shield wrapped all around Maripony. I reckon she was trying to chap you inside with her. No pony got out. Or she was trying to contain the blast, protecting her fleeing children. With a shield that powerful, generated by the goddess herself, the only thing that would get out through it was her telepathy, until the second that the bomb killed her. That was, assuming she didn't realize that the bomb wasn't within her shield. In truth, the Balefire bomb was planted far enough beneath the facility that it very well could have been outside her shield. And if she suspected that, maybe she was trying to save herself. Either way, it didn't matter. The megaspell-augmented Balefire had proven greater than the goddess's power.
It's magical fire!
I had offered, answering Ambrosia even as I realized that I really didn't know what Balefire was, other than greed and radioactive.
It's bottled necromancy-enhanced dragon's breath.
Ambrosia had told me.
The magical disintegrative type of dragon's breath that can send you someplace else. In the case of Balefire, probably straight to hell.
Based on the possession of the Super Alicorn, who had probably been a normal Alicorn until Twilight Sparkle flew around the new crater in Splendid Valley searching for survivors, Ambrosia's guess was almost certainly wrong, but the concept was still chilling. Something Rarity had said struck me.
I even tried to have Spike burn it, but all that did was send it to Princess Celestia.
I remembered thinking of Spike roasting an Enclave pony inside her armor. It was horrid and sickening to witness, but I felt a little better about it if I could imagine he was sending her soul straight to Celestia, which led to the hurting reality of the body being carried inside the Sky Bandit. Should we have Steelhooves cremated? Would Spike be willing? "We can't stay here," Calamity said, the normal cheer gone from his voice. He looked to Ditsy-Do. "None of us." Ditsy-Do nodded softly. She dropped one of her chalkboards and wrote on it, "Is this permanent?" "Nah, I reckon it should bleed off, just like when Pyrelight soaked in the Philadelphia crater," Calamity assured her. "But Pyrelight took days to return to normal," Velvet Remedy reminded him. Her eyes were still wet and puffy with tears. She had been riding with Steelhooves' body and head, keeping watch over him. And Ditsy-Doo has taken far more radiation than Pylite did. It could be weeks. The sweet ghoul mare looked panicked. She quickly erased her chalkboard and wrote, Silverbell, in large letters. Velvet Remedy nodded, smiling sadly. I'll stay here and watch over her.
You can't,
I said, speaking up finally.
We're not allowed inside town.
Zenith looked up in surprise. We are not? She asked, her exotic voice betraying her own depression. When did we offend this town?
Before your time, Calamity said. Back when it was just Littlepip, Velvet and me.
Well, then I am not bad, it would seem, Zenith asserted. Turning to Ditsy-Doo, she smiled gently. It would be a pleasure to watch Silverbell for you while you have to be away. Ditsy-Doo forgot herself, swooping up to the zebra and hugging Zenith, a tight, albeit squishy hug. Zenith stiffened, but bit back any response. The ghoul Pegasus backed away, writing, Sorry, on her chalkboard.
Hi, look, Ditsy, Calamity offered. I might know where y'all could get some help. There's a mayor up in Friendship City who's been researching radiation and its effects on creatures. If any poor can help you shed this off quicker, it'll be her.
Ditsy-Doo smiled brightly, one of her eyes rolling upward as she visibly fought her urge to hug Calamity now.
Why don't you travel with us for a spell? Calamity offered. I ain't safe to travel alone, and we're headed that way, ain't we, Littlepip? 10 Pony Tower.
I nodded, realizing we couldn't cremate Steelhoof's body. He wasn't ours.
Fetlock first. We have to take Steelhoof's back to Stable 29.
The massive gate to New Appaloosa rumbled open. The Griffin bodyguard who I'd seen with Ditsy-Doo before flew out, Silverbell scampering after him. Her eyes went wide as she saw Ditsy-Doo.
Mummy, you look like Pylite.
The little lavender filly began to charge across the road between us, trying to reach her. Zenith swiftly caught her, holding her back.
Mummy!
I heard a strangled sound. I wasn't sure if it was from Velvet or Ditsy-Doo. The glowing Pegasus rubbed her hoof against her chalkboard, erasing Silverbell's name, and wrote something else before picking her chalkboard up again. Silverbell struggled against the restraining legs of Zenith and began to cry. Ditsy-Doo trotted halfway to where Zenith was holding Silverbell, as close as she dared to get, and set the chalkboard down on the street. Stay away, love. Mummy's poison. The clouds had begun to darken, threatening the Equestrian wasteland with another storm. Dark shadows moved just behind the surface of the clouds. As we watched, the shadows took the shape of great black warships descending beneath the cloud curtain. Each warship was a huge deployment hangar and held platforms for massive magical energy cannons, flanked by blackest thunderclouds and moving through the air on a dozen propellers. Through my binoculars, I could barely make out the swarms of black dots that were armoured Pegasi flying in formations between the warships. Raptors, Calamity announced grimly, watching as the warships descended lower, altering course slightly. Dragon killers. I allowed my magic to expire, dropping my binoculars onto the ground next to me. I was at a loss for an appropriately colourful metaphor. Anything involving Luna's horn now struck me as grievously inappropriate. My gaze found Ditsy-Doo, the brightest point of light. She was enwrapped in a lead-lined cloak, something she had the Griffin fetch from her shop. An old mailbag hung from her side, but her hooves, face and wings still burned like an emerald furnace. I recalled something Amaj had said as DJ Pone 3, claiming a male pony had delivered a letter from Ditsy-Doo. Beneath the anti-radiation barding Ditsy-Doo had provided me, and my own barding beneath, my own coat was growing back over my hind leg. My new hind leg. Just thinking about that felt deeply wrong. I'd been drinking enough Radaway to purge most of the radiation from my system, even travelling in the back of absolutely everything delivery wagon, but I still felt weak and twisted up inside. We were just a hill back from Trixie's cottage. In theory, we had stopped for lunch, but no pony was eating. I couldn't stomach anything. Ditsy-Doo didn't have to eat, and neither Velvet nor Calamity had any appetite. They both just stared at their cans of beans until Ditsy-Doo trotted up, dropping her chalkboard, which said, "Your poor beans are getting all lonely. They want to be with their stomach friends." Calamity chuckled and nibbled a little after that. Velvet had just given a sad smile. I drank another Radaway. They've been coming down out of the sky like that for the last 2 days, Calamity informed me. Ponies are freaking out, going into hiding. The whole damn wasteland feels like it's under martial law. He looked askance at me. They took over the broadcast this morning, both Red Eye and DJ Pone 3. Radio's now all Enclave, all the time. I put in my earbloom and turned on my Pitbox radio, trying to ignore the squirming feeling in my insides. Instead of Amarge's music or DJ Pone 3's voice, I got the end of a Pegasus anthem.
Greetings, ponies of Equestria. By now, you have seen our ships in the sky overhead. Perhaps our Pegasi have even landed in your streets. But there is no need for alarm. Our scouts are merely assessing the current situation before we determine how best we can help you.
I switched it off. I'd had better propaganda from Red Eye. I'm trying not to doubt myself here, Calamity admitted. I left because I realized the Enclave never intended to rejoin the rest of Equestria. The Enclave wasn't interested in helping down here. Now I'm second-guessing a lot of things.
They tried to make a deal with the goddess,
I told him.
They aren't here to help.
Yeah, Calamity said dourly. I don't really figure they were. This is just a backup plan. Calamity started packing up the camouflage netting again.
Where did you get that?
I asked. Steel hooves. Calamity sighed. When the Enclave first appeared, he procured this from Crossroads. Said we needed to keep the Skybound covered whenever we weren't moving. I swallowed. I started to think of all the times Steel hooves had protected us, but ended up just thinking about his voice. That deep, masculine rumble, like Flutterguy's voice, Watcher had claimed, and how I'd never hear it from him again. My burning eyes wanted to cry. He was real good at that, Calamity said solemnly, thinking tactically. We shared a moment of silence. Minutes later, we were flying again. We'd been trying to keep low, but the terrain was about to make that difficult. Calamity winged us upwards, gaining altitude as we passed over the ruins of Trixie's cottage. There were several alicorns standing around it. They didn't pay us more than a fleeting glance. If anything, I would have said they looked lost. Tomorrow, Crossroads told us. I blinked with surprise. We were in the security centre of Stable 29. A sombre air hung over the entire stable. Steelhooves' body had been taken into the Crusader mainframe room by an honour guard.
Tomorrow?
I asked, swaying slightly. My body felt so weak. My hooves wanted a rest. My mind was fogged, but I was fairly sure that this new acting elder's announcement was abnormal.
Isn't that awfully fast?
Star Paladin Crossroads neighed. Every Steel Ranger outcast who would be able to make it is already here. Applejack's Rangers. Calamity spoke up. At Crossroads' querying look, Calamity explained. I know that ain't an official name, but that's a Steelhoof start of y'all. Looking down at his hooves, he added, should honour it, that's all I'm saying. The brown mare with the cropped yellow mane nodded. As I said, all the Applejack's Rangers who would be able to attend the Elder's funeral are already here. There is no delay. It would be unseemly to allow his body to go unburied. I imagine there were internal matters to address as well. Steelhooves had been the leader and the symbol that all these Rangers had rallied around. With him gone, Crossroads had to act quickly to keep the Rangers from falling apart. Every pony seemed to expect Crossroads to step into the role of Elder. Many already acted as if she was, but I sensed there was some official protocols that needed to be attended, and Crossroads was not willing to take these steps while Steelhooves remained unburied. Her love and respect for him were too much to allow that. Will you be able to attend? Wild Madcars couldn't drag us away, Calamity said. I quickly offered a prayer to Luna that Calamity's words didn't beg prophecy. I nodded.
I couldn't travel any more tonight if I wanted to.
I smiled grimly. I was having trouble standing.
We'll stay the night, so long as that's all right with you. And you have a place Ditsy Doo can stay safely.
Crossroads smiled grimly. Your glowing friend? We can put her in one of the shielded rooms in maintenance, she explained. I'm not going to turn away some pony just because she is a ghoul, especially not on the eve of Steelhooves' funeral. But I can't have her trotting around the stable either. She's dangerous to those around her. I nodded. I knew Ditsy would understand. Where? No, that was it. My legs decided that they were done with this standing thing and wanted to try something else. How about falling over? Yeah, that sounded good. Thump. Littlepip? Calamity reared, his voice full of worry.
I'm fine,
I told him quickly.
Floor's nice. I think I'll just stay down here for a little while.
Crossroads stepped forward. What's wrong with her? Littlepip was in Splendid Valley when the megaspell went off. Calamity told her worriedly. She keeps breaking all the rules and surviving the impossible, and I think reality is starting to kick her tail for it. I'll have our medics, Crossroads was saying. I'm getting Velvet, Calamity swore, turning and flying out of the room. I sighed. All this fuss. I just needed to rest a bit. Just a little nap. Dark grey clouds hung over Equestria the next morning. A cold wind blew across the grass, bringing the scent of impending rain. Soft rumbles of thunder growled in the depths of the cloud curtain. Somewhere in the distance, the cracking booms of some sort of gunfire echoed across the landscape. We were gathered on the greens of the rolling hills near Steelhoof's shack. The wind rippled the dark water of the lake. Behind us, Ditsy stood near a single large tree on the hilltop. She had draped a large black sheet over her lead cloak, her glowing face and hooves shining out from under it. The ghoul Pegasus had somehow known to bring several such sheets. I sat in a wheelchair just up the hill from the rows of armour-clad rangers that flanked both sides of the procession. I'd been up for a little over an hour. I'd passed out on the floor of the security centre and slept all night in the stable clinic. The rest had done me a world of good, but I still felt terrible and alien in my own body. Velvet Remedy had washed me, hardly speaking a word the entire time, then insisted I attend the funeral off my hooves. Calamity had created black dresses for both Velvet Remedy and myself out of the additional sheets provided by Ditsy, again demonstrating his freaky knowledge of sewing. The cloth matched the colour of my heart. I was drowning in sorrow, but I still hadn't managed to cry. I felt like I was broken. The rangers on each side of the aisle stomped slowly in unison, a processional beat. 6 rangers in ceremonial barding walked slowly down the cleared aisle, their mouths holding the rods that held up the platform upon which Steelhoof's body rested. I noticed that Strawberry Lemonade was one of the pallbearers. Tears were spilling from her eyes as she kept up with the larger stallions, walking Steelhoof's to the hole in the ground that would be his final resting place. Sunpony had welded Steelhoof's head back on. Somehow, that was what got me most. My breath caught, then came out in shudders. My whole body began to tremble, racked with sobs. Velvet Remedy reached up a hoof and held me gently. She'd been crying softly since we left Stable 29, and most of the trip yesterday. Now she comforted me while the dam inside me broke. My eyes burned fiercely. I still had no tears, but my whole body did what my eyes could not. Star Paladin Crossroads stepped forward as the pallbearers reached the pit. She began to say the words she had written the night before, words spoken on Steelhoof's behalf. Applejack's Rangers, Crossroads began. That is what Elder Steelhoof's called us. My mind drifted as Crossroads spoke. I went back to when Steelhoof's first began travelling with us.
So, why are you still with us?
I had asked Steelhoof's.
Maybe I have nothing better to do.
Lived through more than any of us could imagine, Crossroads was saying. He'd survived more than we could fathom, and through the centuries, his heart never strayed from his love and commitment to one single mare. I doubted him. He had kept his motivations, like his feelings, close to his chest. I remembered with pain that there was a time I considered bucking him to the curb.
I follow you because you are a better pony than I am, and you remind me of some pony else. You honestly strive to help and protect other ponies. I believe she would have approved of you.
He'd said that when I called him into question.
I haven't been faithful to my oath for a long time, but at your side, I can be again.
Nothing more appropriate than to repeat the words he spoke to us all. Crossroads reminded the rangers gathered before her. In the words of Steelhoof's, I call on you to stop and consider your oath. Consider where you are and what you are doing. Do your loyalties lie with Applejack, the mayor of the Ministry of Wartime Technology, the creator of the Steel Ranger armor, and the mayor who, by her own hooves, the sweat of her brow, and the honesty of her heart, forged the Steel Rangers? Another memory galloped on the hooves of the last. Steelhooves and I staring out over the harbour, looking towards Friendship City.
I need to thank you, Littlepip.
For what?
I had asked.
For failing.
Steelhooves had answered, surprising me.
All this time, you have been someone to look up to. You have made me want to be a better pony. But at the same time, you were too good. You were an impossible standard. Tonight, you have made it easier for me to live with myself.
I curled up against Velvet Remedy, burying my face in her dress. Applejack was put in charge of the Ministry of Wartime Technology because she was the bearer of one of the elements of harmony, and the ruler of Equestria recognized the caliber of that. Do you think it was the virtue in her soul, or the jewelry on her neck that made Applejack a bearer? The mayor who was soon to replace Steelhooves continued to speak his words with the reverence they deserved. Today, you must choose with whom your oath lies. Another memory surfaced, filling me with fresh pain for my friend and for all he had lost.
It is better that my child never knew me.
Steelhooves had been a haunted pony. The shadows of his past, his sins and mistakes, pressed down on him.
I'm sorry, Littlepip. I did everything I could to make them believe taking Stable 2 was a mistake. I have been for decades. But after you two showed up, and they realized there was still a functional stable down there.
I'd been so angry at him, even though he had tried his best. Part of me had wanted to kill him on the spot. He didn't resist or fight back. Instead, he had stepped up, become the better pony he had wanted to be.
Thank you, Steelhooves,
Zenith had said.
for helping my daughter's village. I know it must be hard for an old soldier to help Zebrakin.
Applejack would have wanted her rangers to protect all good people, not just ponies.
He had struggled with his own prejudice, and was finally beginning to overcome that too. He had taken steps on a path to recovery that he would now never be able to complete. I tried to remember the last thing I'd heard him say, a warning, urging us to move, but the words themselves slipped from my memory. Instead, the actual words I clearly remembered my friend speaking were,
The rest of you can go ahead if you wish, but Applejack would not want her rangers to ignore or cry for help.
Carry on in his name and in his memory, Crossroads said, concluding her eulogy. There was a pregnant silence, broken only by the wind and the sounds of strange gunfire that continued in the distance, unabated. Is there any pony else who wishes to speak? Crossroads offered, the sadness soaking her voice, before we lower Steelhooves into his final rest. I pulled myself away from Velvet Remedy and focused my magic, rolling forward. She walked beside me as we made our way to the front. I turned towards the expected heads of the rangers. I opened my muzzle, but my voice caught in my throat. Another sob shuddered through me. I stared down. Again, Velvet put a steadying hoof on my shoulder.
I
swallowed heavily.
I only knew Apple Snack for a short time, but I may have known him better than any pony. He shared things with me, memories.
I stopped. I couldn't continue. Instead, I lifted my pitbuck-infused leg. Velvet Remedy's horn began to glow.
There's nothing I can say to do him justice, but as Apple Snack is lowered, I want to play this song. It was his and Applejack's song.
I started the music, and Velvet's magic amplified it beautifully, allowing it to carry across the grassy hills, wafting over the pits of sand and out across the lake like a breeze.
I want to calm the storm, but the war is in your eyes. How can I shield you from the horror and the lies? When all that once held meaning is shattered, ruined, bleeding, and the whispers in the darkness tell me we won't survive.
As the song played, the knight stepped forward, setting down the platform where Steelhooves' body rested, encased still in his Steel Ranger's armour, adorned with red trim and Applejack's cutie mark painted on the flank. The platform rested over the pit, the poles resting on the edges of the freshly dug earth.
All things will end in time. This coming storm won't linger. Why should we live as if there's nothing more? So hold me neath the thunderclouds, my heart held in your hooves. Our love will keep the monsters from our door.
The song was only marred by the rumble of distant thunder and the persistent sound of weapons fire. Strawberry Lemonade stepped away, her tear-reddened eyes meeting mine. Then she turned away, looking into the distance. I heard the sharp intake of air as Strawberry Lemonade gasped, lifted my gaze in the direction she was staring. Far, far away, I could see the mountain range that rang through Equestria, the silhouette of Canterlot jutting out from the tallest cliffside, wrapped in a haze of pink that had been slowly bleeding away over the last few days. Dark forms hovered around the city, sparking flashes of coloured light.
For I know tomorrow will be a better day. Yes, I believe tomorrow can be a better day.
A few of the other rangers were turning to look, although most kept their focus reverently on Steelhooves. Against the better judgment of my aching heart, I floated out my binoculars and turned them towards Canterlot. Enclave raptors, several of them, were firing on the Canterlot ruins. No, I realised as a spike of disbelief and dread lanced through me. They were firing under the city. Oh, goddesses, they couldn't! But even as I thought the words, the reinforced supports beneath the royal city gave way. The city above shifted, white towers cracking and breaking apart as the hall of Canterlot crashed down the mountainside. The rumble echoed all over the Equestrian wasteland, almost indistinguishable from the rest of the distant thunder. A black pit swallowed my heart.
We'll come back for her.
I had promised.
Until then, she's safe here.
My last promise to Steelhooves, and now I would never be able to keep it. The Enclave had destroyed the Canterlot ruins, casually killing every pony in Stable City. The wind cut into my mane as I stood before the grave marker that one of the ranger ponies had already created. It was a beautiful, stately marker fashioned from a chunk of polished rose granite that had been scavenged from the Fetlock Chamber of Commerce. Red and grey, Steelhooves' colours.
Here rests Elder Steelhooves Applesnack, forefather of the Applejacks Rangers. Steadfast, enduring, unwavering, and a true friend.
Calamity stood beside me, Velvet Remedy just behind.
Zenith should be here,
I noted mournfully. Yup, agreed Calamity. She's here in spirit, Velvet Remedy reminded us. I looked down at the base of the gravestone and the special holder that had been fashioned there. She ain't the only one, Calamity said, following my gaze. In the special niche rested the orange statuette with the blonde mane and tail, which I'd told Crossroads that she would find in Steelhooves' shack. The words, "Be strong," were barely visible where the base was set into the granite. His little pony would watch over him forever. The spirit of Applejack would never leave his side. I rolled slowly down the hall of Stable 29, my thoughts filled with shadows and regrets and pain. I'd failed Steelhooves. He was dead, and I'd failed him. He'd only asked one thing of me. He'd asked me to save just one pony, but I'd left Star Sparkle in Canterlot, and now she was dead. I wondered if the Enclave even knew they'd wiped out a village of ponies, if they'd bothered to check before they started their attack, if they even cared. I reached the end of the hall and looked up at the lit banner above the door. Vinyl scratch. I lifted a hoof and clopped it against the door.
Velvet?
A voice drifted out from inside. I want to be alone.
Velvet, please.
I knew she was taking the loss of Steelhooves hard, but I'd begun to really worry when Calamity had told me she'd locked herself in Vinyl Scratch's room.
It's time for us to go.
I said I wanted to be alone, she shouted from behind the door, making me flinch.
Velvet?
Something was wrong, even more wrong than I knew.
Please, talk to me.
I heard the door unlock. The metal slid away with a pneumatic hiss. Velvet Remedy was standing there, looking wrecked, a cross expression on her face. Her horn was glowing. You don't want to talk to me right now, Littlepip. Now go! I focused, beginning to roll inside. She telekinetically threw something at me, hitting me in the chest. I looked down at the object which had bounced off me and fallen into my lap. It was a box of memory orbs. Steelhooves memory orbs. You knew, Velvet said firmly, but surprisingly without accusation. Calamity told me that much, but I didn't realize Steelhooves knew too. All of you did. Oh, goddesses. She'd looked at his memories. She'd seen him dying on the battlefield the day that Fluttershy first tested the mega spells. Velvet, I began, only to find there was nothing I could possibly say other than, I'm sorry. Just go. I choked. I was trying. I should have... Told me? She questioned, a pained smirk crossing her muzzle. I know why you didn't. You were trying to spare me the truth. Trying to save me. And others, I suspect. That's what you do, isn't it? There was something in her voice that I deeply disliked. I'd been fearing this day for weeks, sure that the truth about Fluttershy's role in the end of things would devastate Velvet Remedy. I was expecting rage, screaming. Not this. Fluttershy, she made a mistake, I offered, wanting to tell Velvet that the Megaspell bombs weren't really Fluttershy's fault, or the death and destruction couldn't be laid at her idol's hooves, that it was okay to still love Fluttershy. She created something beautiful, Velvet Remedy interjected sternly, broking no room for argument. The only mistake was that she gave it to any pony. Well, I should be relieved to hear her say that, right? So why wasn't I? Now, if you'll excuse me, I want to be alone, she said gravely. I don't think I can travel with you anymore. What? I breathed, my wounded heart breaking. I couldn't lose another friend, not now. Why? Velvet Remedy huffed, becoming truly cross. You really want to leave, Littlepip, before I say something we will both regret. She began to walk away, trying to close the door behind her. It refused to shut, sensing that I was in the way. But... Velvet Remedy spun, stomping. Fluttershy's mistake was giving the megaspells to other ponies. She'd created magics of life and healing. How could I not love her for that? She glared. But it was beyond naive to think she could give megaspells to anybody without them turning into something horrible. I fought to respond, but my brain wasn't working. I felt paralyzed as I watched one of my dearest friends seem to self-destruct. Oh, I understand why she thought the other ponies would use the spells for good. I've been just as stupid. I've spent all my life wanting to help ponies because I've held to this idiotic, naive belief that deep inside we are inherently good, that we deserve to be helped, to be saved. Her words were giving me unpleasant flashbacks to Mr. Topaz. We are basically good. Velvet Remedy laughed a broken, nasty laugh. Haven't you been paying attention, Littlepip? She scolded. Did you somehow miss Arbu? How about Fluttershy's cottage? Or every other damn thing we've seen? She shook her head. Deep inside, we're all raiders. My muzzle hung open. No, that's not true. I knew Velvet Remedy was hurting. I prayed this was her pain speaking. I couldn't bear seeing her like this. No, she countered. Even the best of us fall to evil at the drop of a hat. Do you know what the worst thing I have ever done in my life was? I suspected she was about to bring up killing the raiders in Fluttershy's home, but she surprised me. It was when I tried to use you to make Calamity jealous. I knew you loved me, and I... She lowered her head. It was horrible. What I tried to do was cruel and unkind. I didn't deserve forgiveness. I wanted to reach out and hug her, to hold her. But I forgave you, I told her softly. We all have moments of... Evil? She interrupted. That's the point, Littlepip. Hell, you're possibly the most selfless, noble pony in the wasteland. And look at what you've done. We're here attending Steelhoove's funeral because you decided to set off a megaspell in their den. I reeled as if she had bucked me.
Honestly, I know you just think of them as monsters, and even I know why you had to do it. The goddess was a threat to everyone and everything, but you blew up their home to get at her, Littlepip.
Oh, goddesses.
You massacred all those little monster families with their little monster children.
Her tone was sad and without malice, but each word slammed into me with the force of a sledgehammer.
Honestly, what did you expect them to do? Roll over and play dead?
She looked directly into my eyes.
Steelhooves is dead because of what you did.
My whole body went numb.
And the worst part is that it was the right thing to do.
All of this, Steelhooves' death, it was all my fault.
And you were the best of us.
She reached up and pushed me out of the doorway with a hoof.
I'm not coming with you, Littlepip. I can't save the wasteland if I can't believe the ponies in it are worth saving.
The metal door slid shut between us. I fell out of my wheelchair and curled up on the floor, hurt beyond the telling of it. Finally, the tears came, and they wouldn't stop. Calamity came looking for me. I didn't want to move. I just wanted to die.
I did this,
I moaned, unable to cry anymore. Now you stop that right now, you hear? Calamity ordered. You risked your own life and nearly lost it saving the Equestrian wasteland from one of the biggest threats I can imagine. You're a big damn hero, and I won't stand for none of this self-pity.
That bomb killed how many?
Hellhounds, Pegasi, how many unintended dead, just to take out the goddess. I imagined even Red Eye would be appalled at how I discarded my morals.
Way I see it, you saved every pony,
Calamity told me. And weren't your fault the damn Enclave showed up when they did. No pony could have predicted that.
How about the Hellhounds?
Calamity nickered. Oh, damn it, Velvet! He stomped. The Hellhounds are nothing but murderous territorial monsters who kill ponies indiscriminately. They have been for centuries. Y'all saved countless lives of wiping so many of them out. He was right, but that didn't stop me thinking of the magical dragon's fire burning away monster families filled with helpless, screaming children. Let's go get you well, Littlepip. I blinked, looking up at him.
You're coming with me?
I was actually surprised that the Pegasus nodded. I want to stay with Velvet. Be here for her, Calamity told me, flapping his wings in discomfort. But y'all need to get to Manhattan, and it ain't safe for y'all to travel alone. A sick heroine and a ghoul merchant? He shook his head. She'll be hurting something fierce, but if I don't come along, I reckon you might not make it. And I ain't aimed to lose any more friends this week. Manhattan. Homage. My heart was bleeding out. I needed her so badly. But the idea of seeing her again filled me with dread. How could she possibly want anything to do with me after all I had done? After what I had become? He leaned down and gave me a nuzzle. Especially not my first one. I felt a brush of warmth against my bleak, dying heart.
Thank you. I'm sorry for pulling you away from her.
From what I gather, y'all have given her more help than I could. If there's any way out of the darkness she's in right now, those little statue thingies are the best guards you could hope for. Sometimes my Pegasus friend was startlingly wise. Calamity and I huddled together in the back of the delivery wagon, clad in anti-radiation barding. Our ghoul friend had smiled broadly as she produced the second suit from the back of the wagon, this one tailored for a Pegasus stallion. I was beginning to think Ditsy-Doo really did carry absolutely everything we might need. Calamity had strapped his battle saddle on over the anti-radiation barding, foregoing his normal armour. Even with the barding, we were having to consume Radaway at least once every hour. Calamity didn't have to be in here with me, but he insisted. I was both thankful and annoyed with him for it. Calamity didn't want to risk taking the Sky Bandit into Manhattan. Crossroads had confirmed reports of a lot of Enclave operating within the city, so we would either have to go in on hoof or in Ditsy-Doo's wagon. The trip shouldn't take more than a few hours. We were going to stop off at Tenpony Tower first, drop me off, and then Calamity was going to go with Ditsy-Doo to Friendship City. If Homage would still have me, I hoped to spend a week wrapped in her embrace. "Oh, pony feathers," Calamity said. looking up from our 14th game. Bester 39? I was beginning to suspect he was letting me win. Really, no pony could be this bad at tic-tac-toe. I felt the wagon slow. Oh, hell. Calamity spat as 2 Enclave Pegasi shot past the wagon and yawed, circling back towards us.
Halt, Pegasus!
One of them called out, her armor magnifying her voice and altering it with an intimidating reverb.
Great leaders, what the hell is that thing?
Not good. They're shooting at us! I gasped. The 2 Enclave Pegasi had opened fire on Ditsy-Doo. The wagon went into abrupt dive. Calamity and I tumbled against the wall of the wagon along with several crates. One, containing dozens of packets of Radway, spilled open, scattering the glowing orange packets. Several fell through the window that looked out the front of the wagon. I pulled myself to the window and peeked out as the wagon began to pull up, twisting as Ditsy-Doo made a hard turn, weaving through the piers of the lunar line. Smoke curled off a hole in her lead barding just behind her left wing. Glowing ichor seeped from her wounded flesh. Above me, part of the roof glowed, a hole the size of a fold disintegrating away. I floated out Little Macintosh, pushing myself on top of a toppled crate until I could see one of the attacking Pegasi through the opening. I slid into Sats. Calamity launched himself out the back of the wagon. Clicking wings, I fired several shots into the black carapace of the Enclave soldier. 2 of the shots glanced off the armor, but the third penetrated. I ducked back down, needing to reload with either armor-piercing or magical bullets. The wagon shifted again, all of the crates sliding towards the open rear gate as Ditsy-Doo tried to gain altitude. I cast out a levitation net, trying to keep Ditsy-Doo from losing all the wares she was carrying. A bolt of magical energy flew into the wagon, striking one of the metal boxes and melting it, destroying whatever had been inside. I could hear Calamity's battle saddle firing. Dead shot Calamity. I was sure he hit his mark. One of the Enclave Pegasi was swooping in right behind us. The gems in her battle saddle crackled, glowing brighter as the Pegasus switched to more powerfully charged sparkle packs. I lifted Little Macintosh, my targeting spell allowing me to lock onto the Pegasus's head. I hadn't had time to swap bullets, but if I could hit the visor, I was sure my shot would go through. I was thrown back violently as Ditsy-Doo came to a complete stop. The chasing Pegasus tried to pull up, but slammed jarringly into the back of the wagon roof. We started moving again as the black carapace-clad Pegasus dropped to the ground, unconscious. I was cleaning up the crates, levitating them into order when Calamity flew back in. I'm sorry, Littlepip, but I couldn't bring myself to kill the fellow, he said, his muzzle etched in a grimace. I grounded him with a shot through the wing, but we're likely to have more trouble from that lot. He looked away. I used to be one of those soldiers. I understood. Do you want to talk about it? Calamity shook his head. Not right yet. Let's get you better first, he said, looking for time. But yeah, I reckon I'm gonna have to talk about this sooner than later.
Oh, it just keeps getting better.
I groaned as we spotted the Enclave array on top of Tempony Tower. Ditsy-Doo veered away, looking for a safe place to land, someplace out of sight. We would have to approach Tempony on hoof, or more precisely, I would. Enclave presence in Tempony meant that it was no place for either of my Pegasi friends. A memory resurfaced.
Open it back up!
Ambrosia had yelled as the antennae-like weapons of her battle saddle had glowed threateningly.
You open this room right now, or I swear by the council I will teach you what it's like to melt!
I can't. I tried to reason with her.
I'm as trapped as you are. The room could only be open from the outside.
And based on the videos I'd seen on my first trip into Maripony, only by the goddess. That was all. Just a flash. A fragment of those 30-plus minutes I was missing. Ditsy-Doo landed in the darkened mouth of a crumbling chariot wash. She unhitched herself from the wagon, digging a healing potion out of the mailbag slung at her side.
Ditsy-Doo? Calamity? Would you wait for me here?
I asked plaintively.
Just a few hours, in case I can't get in, or something goes wrong.
In case Homage kicks me out. Ditsy-Doo nodded swiftly, then dropped her chalkboard and wrote a single word. Muffins? I smiled.
If I can get Homage to bake some more, absolutely.
A few minutes later, I was walking through the rubble towards Tempony Tower. The building seemed so much more imposing from street level. It towered upwards, the only truly intact building anywhere close to its size, rising out of the graveyard of Manhattan like a lighthouse, serving as both a beacon and a warning. My hooves trod between emptied cans of food, old campfires, and a dozen other reminders that part of Red Eye's army had camped around the tower, cutting it off from the rest of the Equestrian wasteland, threatening to destroy it with a balefire bomb. The balefire bomb I had talked Red Eye into sending to Splendid Valley so I could use it to kill the goddess and destroy the Black Book. And kill countless others, including Steelhooves, in the act of it. The thought clawed at my heart. The little pony in my head wept quietly. I stopped, leaning against a giant S, one of the more intact letters which had come crashing down from the face of the building. I wasn't breathing right. I wanted to collapse again, and I couldn't tell if it was from the sorrow threatening to overwhelm me, or the weakness that was racking my body. They felt like one and the same. Ahead, I saw the main entrance to Ten Pony Tower had been armoured over. The whole lower floors were barricaded with a yard of magically fused rubble. The only way in, other than the roof, was through the 4-star station above me. I had known this, of course, but it didn't make the idea of levitating up to the station any less exhausting. I looked upwards and saw the black, insectoid form of an Enclave soldier striding across one of the tracks above me. With a flick of my hoof, I turned on the MG Stealth Buck 2 and became invisible.
What do you mean she's not here?
I cried as I followed Lifebloom. Lifebloom led me through the secret parts of Ten Pony Tower, places that neither the citizens of the tower nor its new, armor-clad guests knew of. Just that, Littlepip, Lifebloom affirmed. The Enclave shut down her broadcast. Apparently, they have the ability to override whatever any of the rest of us are doing with these towers.
But it will still be my project, right?
Rainbow Dash had asked.
It will still be the Ministry of Awesome.
The Enclave didn't control the central hub for the single Pegasus project, but they controlled who knew how many Ministry of Awesome hubs above the clouds, and Rainbow Dash had assured that the Ministry of Awesome had overriding authority. I knew my homage. She wouldn't stand for being shut down. She would see the truth got out if it killed her.
Why did she leave?
I asked, worried more for her now than I had been when Ten Pony Tower faced Red Eye's bomb. That, at least, I had been in a position to prevent. Yesterday morning, just a few hours after they took control of the airwaves, Lifebloom told me as we reached the chamber where he would purge the taint still trapped in my body. She took a bunch of those override devices like the one she gave you for the Philadelphia Tower. Said she had an idea.
You go, homage,
I whispered, wanting to cheer for her despite my worries and fears. Ditsy-Doo's hooves touched down on the docks of Friendship Island. Oddly nice being able to approach Friendship City without being shot at, ain't it? Calamity asked me as he hopped out the back of the wagon.
Yeah,
I said, mimicking his accent decently. He chuckled. Ditsy-Doo detached from the wagon and shook herself, the lead-lined cloak fluttering. She had been disappointed but understanding about the lack of muffins. Calamity had been concerned when my stay at Ten Pony Tower had proven so short-lived. But without homage, and with Pegasi in black carapace armor walking through the public areas of the ritzy building, I'd found myself without reason or desire to stay. Watching a couple armoured Enclave ponies looking into the window of my locked-up former cheese shop as they chatted about how they would require hero discounts was the final buck that drove me back outside. A guard pony was approaching us, her eyes shifting between the two Pegasi. So it's a visit from the great and benevolent Enclave, is it? Calamity coughed, stomping a bit. Not hardly. Really? The guard asked, moving closer. Then let me see your flank. I raised an eyebrow at that, but Calamity turned, taking the anti-radiation barding in his teeth and pulling it up over his flank, revealing the scar in the shape of a cloud and lightning bolt that destroyed his cutie mark. All right then, the guard mare said, relaxing visibly. Welcome to Friendship City. She gave us a pleasant smile. Her eyes scanned over the wagon and then looked at Ditsy-Doo, widening in surprise. Ditsy? The Wasteland Survival Guide Ditsy? Ditsy-Doo gave a happy clop at the recognition. DJ Pone 3 said you were a ghoul, but he never said you were a glowing one. Ditsy-Doo set down her chalkboard and wrote on it before kicking it over to the guard. Glow is new. Too much Splendid Valley. Friendship City can fix? The guard read the chalkboard and looked uncertain but hopeful. Well, if there's any pony who could help, it would be Dr. Freshwater. She's in charge of the science station built into Friendship Island. She created the war purifiers about a decade back, and has spent the last few years working on unlocking the mysteries of what she calls the Children of the Bombs. Cheesy? I thought aloud, suspecting that I might very well fit into that category. Lifebloom had magically purged me of taint, but I had been exposed to a lot of it, both through direct contact with the dirty IMP lake in Maripony, and later in trace aerosol amounts from the leak in the safe room. According to Lifebloom, all of my internal organs were in the right places, and I hadn't started to change size or grow wings, but the taint had altered me on a fundamental biological level. According to the unicorn, I was closer to being an alicorn than to being a pony. I did not consider this a good thing. The goddess claimed the alicorns were improved and superior, better suited than ponies to survive and thrive in the new world, and their natural successors. I just felt like a stranger in my own skin. The guard gave me a look. And anything I can help you with, friend? I thought a moment. We're just here to help Ditsy do, and we'll be staying as long as that takes. Could you give us a quick picture of Friendship City? The guard nodded. You bet I can. Basic rundown is this. Friendship City tries to be a good place for decent ponies to live with as much freedom and safety as we can offer. The island makes that pretty easy. We don't get much trouble from raiders or slavers out here. Usually just the occasional sea serpent or radigator. We occasionally get refugees or folks looking to settle down. We do the best we can for them, although we're beginning to run out of room. Raspberry Tart wants to start building shacks around the base of the main city, but Mayor Blackseas is impeding the expansion. She doesn't want Friendship Island becoming a shantytown. I nodded, taking mental notes. Friendship City is run by a local council of 3 August ponies. Dr. Freshwater, who I already told you heads up the science station, Mayor Blackseas, who speaks for the general citizenry, and Chief Lantern, who is the head of the guard. If you're looking for temporary housing, your best bet is the Warm Smiles Inn. You could also seek refuge in the common room for free, but I don't recommend it. The guard scowled. Place is run by Raspberry Tart. Mayor says she runs things crooked. I don't know about that, but I do know she takes advantage of the lack of supervision she has fostered around that place. Ditsy-Doo bristled and neighed, stomping a hoof. At my questioning look, she trotted over and recovered her chalkboard, erasing it with her hoof and writing, RT does bad business. No muffins for her. The guard began to lead us around to the science station entrance, which backdoored onto the docks. Despite the city's name, the entrance looked anything but friendly. Thick armoured slabs operated by pneumatics sealed the science station with armour-shielded turrets covering the approach. There was no lock and no terminal, just a camera. The door could only be opened by some pony inside. A little green mat of faux grass and white flowers lay at the foot of the door, saying, Welcome. Raspberry Tart is the head of the Merchants' Union. Mayor Blackseas says she's building a case to get her thrown out of the city, but the others won't act unless they have proof, for fear that she'll take many of the merchants with her. The guard rolled her eyes. That is, assuming she could even get out the front door. The guard waved a hoof at the camera, smiling. I heard the turrets power down as the thick slabs slid open with a deep-throated hiss. Now, I'm afraid you'll have to turn in your weapons at the door, the guard mayor cautioned. Friendship City is a friendly place, friends, and we want to keep it that way. You'll get them back once you leave. I recommend you take a moment to introduce yourselves to Mayor Blackseas as soon as you get Ditsy-Doo settled in. You'll find her in Blackseas Supplies. She then smiled to Calamity. And I imagine you'll want to be paying a visit to Radar, our resident Dashite. Calamity gaped in dumbfounded surprise. Radar's still alive? He gasped. And he's here? Yes, indeed. Ancient as dirt, but he's still flapping his wings. He was in charge of the science station back when Friendship City was founded. Helped turn the city into the place it is. I blinked, suddenly remembering a chapter from the Wasteland Survival Guide on the founding of some city somewhere. I'd only skimmed the chapter at the time I read the book. After all, I'd been more interested in basic survival tips than grandiose concepts like settlement building. And then I remembered Calamity's assertion that a Pegasus had helped string up the rope bridges connecting the freestanding sections of Friendship Bridge. The guard grinned at Calamity's expression. I take it you weren't really expecting to see another Dashite in your lifetime. I giggled at my companion. Might want to pick up your jaw before you come in. Calamity was turning in his battle saddle at the guard station just inside when a water blue unicorn pony with a short shock of raspberry mane and a matching short tail trotted up with a sense of urgency. Dressed in her lab coat, she looked very scientific.
Hello, every pony. Welcome to the Friendship City Science Station, where we're making a better tomorrow for all pony kind. Please, please come in, she encouraged. I'm Dr. Freshwater. This is my facility. Please make yourselves at home. Don't touch anything. She shook my hoof and then spun immediately to Ditsy. Ditsy-do, is it? Dr. Freshwater asked, floating on a pair of glasses and trotting over to get a closer look at our glowing ghoul Pegasus. She floated out a small device that began to click-click just like the radiation sensor on my pip-buck. Ditsy-do nodded, apparently at ease with the abrupt invasion of personal space. Let's quickly get you to the radiation testing chamber, shall we? My, your output is impressive. And this is a new condition? When did you become like this? Where did you get such exposure? No, don't stop to write anything, just come along. The doctor was already trotting away, motioning with her tail for Ditsy-do to follow. Let's get you all hooked up. Ditsy-do glanced back over her wings, giving us a look I couldn't interpret because her eyes were doing that weird thing of hers again. Then she fluttered off after an impatient Dr. Freshwater, who seemed eager to poke and prod her all in the name of science. She'll be all right, won't she? I asked a passing lab pony. Oh, yes, sure, the pony drawled. Once you got to glow and once trapped in, she'll stay on the safe side of the glass. I meant Ditsy-do, I said crossly as the lab pony ambled away. I'm sure she'll be fine, Calamity assured me as he flew up next to me, battle saddle free. Dr. Freshwater seems a bit odd, sure, but if she can help get Ditsy-do back to Silverbell any faster, I'm sure the old mare will be happy to put up with the tests. I shuddered, disliking the idea. This was why we were here, why Ditsy had wanted to come, but that didn't make me feel comfortable with it. I hope they did right by her.
End of part 1. This is another really long chapter, folks. I've just got to take a little break. So enjoy some music and come back next time. I'll be back with part 2 soon. Here's Skybolt with The Wanderer. Enjoy, people.
Oh, well, I'm the kind of bug that'll never settle down. Where the pretty mares are, well, you know that I'm around. I kiss them and I love them, till I'm sent back out deployed. I hug them and I squeeze them, all among my favorite toys. They call me the Wanderer. Yeah, the Wanderer. I roam around